spoken about the Green Party being about social justice, peace and human rights. How do your key campaign priorities contribute to women's rights? And in particular, what role does it play in progressing rights for ethnic minority women?
Well, I mean, my policies are all about human rights, social justice, so obviously there's benefits for everybody in that. But I think largely ethnic minority women tend to be in the lower paid groups, and one of my policies is to make sure everyone is paid a living wage. And I don't know the figures for ethnic minorities, but I know that women in general are much more likely to be paid less than a living wage for London, which is currently calculated at £7.20 an hour. I want to make sure every employee in London gets at least that, and I can, as mayor or as an assembly member, I can push through making sure the GLA group of companies pay that money to all their workers, and that the companies they contract pay to all their workers. We can put a lot of pressure on the hotel and hospitality industry, which employs a lot of women and employs a lot of women on very low wages. So there's an awful lot we can do there to improve the prospects for the lower paid workers. In addition, I've gone further than that. At the Women's Low Pay Day last year, I made a pledge to make sure that all public sector, all GLA groups and companies employed by them carry out gender pay audits. There's an awful lot we have to do. London has the biggest pay gap between average rates of pay for women and men in the whole of the country, and I think we can do a lot to make things more equal by carrying out these audits and paying real attention to where there is discrimination in the workplace causing this 20–25% difference in pay between women and men.
So looking at politics now, women are still less likely than men to be engaged in politics. How do you intend to reach out and engage with London's diverse women to close the gap between women's lives and politics?
What I find is women are often engaged in local community campaigning, and all they generally need is someone to come up to them and say, why don't you get involved in politics? That's the only reason I'm involved in politics, is because someone came up to me and I was running a campaign and said, why don't you stand for election? Why don't you run for mayor, because you've run this campaign? And you just need somebody to encourage you. I think mentoring is incredibly important. Women need to be encouraging other women to get involved, and it also helps to have good examples. So hopefully I'm setting a good example to young women around the country that, you know, politics can be for them and you can get somewhere in politics if you just put your name forwards. It's quite often the case that women feel like they don't want to put their name forwards. They don't feel like they fit the image of you know, the kindly uncle kind of parliamentary candidate image that we have, and I'm hopefully helping to break that mould myself, and I hopefully am going around, and when I meet women doing great things, saying, why don't you get involved in politics? It's so important that we can change the world. We are doing. We're the people driving forward things like plastic bags campaigns and cycling campaigns and things like that. But are we actually getting into the positions of power? Not as much as we should be. And I think it's really important that women do put their names forwards, get involved, and, you know, bite the bullet and get into politics.
Thank you. Some ethnic minority groups are underrepresented on the electoral register. Fawcett Society has a new campaign to increase the number of ethnic minority women who are registered to vote and engaged in politics. What message would you give to those ethnic minority women who just don't register to vote?
I think if you don't vote, if you don't register to vote, you are missing an opportunity, and it's incredibly important this particular election in London as well that we keep out the far right groups. They don't just hate immigrants, they don't just hate ethnic minorities, they've said some terrible things about rape being a myth, they hate women, they hate absolutely everybody, and it's so important that we keep them out. And every single person who votes for any party who isn't from the far right helps to stop that happening, and it's so important that people get out and vote in this election. But in a general sense, yeah, if you want to have a say, you've got to register to vote. You know, democracy matters and you matter, and if you vote, then you are exercising your rights to have your say. It's just so important that people do it. I don't think I've ever missed a vote, and I'm so glad that I've had my say, even though my candidates often don't win.
So finally, if you were elected as mayor, how would you create a fairer London and promote equality between men and women in the capital generally, whether it's politics, whether it's employment?
Well, I've talked already about my policies for making sure that lower paid workers are paid more, making sure that we have gender equality audits in the public sector. But there's obviously a lot more we can do. I think the conferences that are run, the Capital Women Conference, fantastic event that I've been to a couple of times, very, very inspiring. We need to have more events like that, encouraging women. And my other main policy is to shake up funding in the voluntary sector. There's too many projects that have start up and then suffer from lack of funding. They rely on short-term grants that disappear after a year, and these people in the projects, they're not getting on with the work they set up the project to do, they're getting on with filling in forms to get more grants. So I really want to set a good example with London Development Agency funding first of all, and hopefully spread that throughout the voluntary sector, of giving people at least a couple of years worth of funding to really get going in the beginning before you start asking them to show results. And then established projects, things like the Southall Black Sisters, which has been going on since 1979, is now suffering from a funding crisis. Established projects should have security of funding from a range of sources, and we do need to have 5-10 year grants put in place so that projects like that, and rape crisis centres again, there's examples right across the system of really good projects that are doing so, providing a really good service that just aren't getting the funding they need. And I think I can set a good example in the Mayor's office by changing the way it's done at a London level.
Excellent.